Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Town Hall. My name is Adam Spencer. I want to start by acknowledging the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, the traditional owners of the land upon which we meet this evening, and pay my respects to elders, past and present. I'll be your MC for tonight's proceedings. Some of you might know me from some of the city's big ticket items, the city talks and the city conversations we've had in years gone by. We'll have more of this year. Well, tonight is the first time I've had the pleasure of being an MC for a public meeting, and it's great to see a group of concerned citizens assembled at such short notice, less than a week, in fact. You've all come along tonight. It's quite energising to see you all here, and I'm sure we will inform and at times provoke you. A couple of items of housekeeping. You haven't been at an event at this venue before. In the unlikely event of an emergency, an announcement will be made. Please follow the instructions from the well-trained venue staff. If you've got a mobile phone with you, you don't have to turn it off entirely, but turn it to silent. I know we've got a few Twitter and SMS freaks here. Will be catered for later this evening in the Q&A section of the night. The City of Sydney will take some photos to capture this event, which may be used for brochures, flyers and advertisements, etc. So please just make it clear to the photographers as they come round if you object to having your photo taken. Tonight's event's also being videoed. The video will be available on the City of Sydney website. So welcome one and all to Have Your Say WestCONnex. As Jacob Solwick wrote in the Weekend's Herald, it's the biggest transport project in Sydney since the Harbour Bridge. Roads Minister Duncan Gay calls it a $15 billion fix for the roads of Sydney, coming in at double the comparative cost of the Snowy Mountain scheme. The Prime Minister says we'll have people singing in their cars. Well, tonight, that claim and many more will be examined by our panel, who will make their submissions and they'll answer your questions. Now, you see on the screen there both a hashtag and SMS number, so have your phones up already. In the course of tonight's presentations, if there's a question you'd like to raise when we get to the Q&A, just send it up either Twitter with a hashtag of WestCONnex or SMS to 0477 355 624, and those questions will be fed into the discussion which will take place after our keynote speakers. The first one of which, please welcome to the lectern, the Lord Mayor of the City of Sydney, Clover Moore.
As Adam said, this very important meeting and that we decided to hold about a week ago, and we're so pleased that you could come. I first of all would like to acknowledge the original custodians of our land, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and pay my respects to their elders both past and present, and also acknowledge the people of the 200 nationalities who live in our city. So, the $15 billion, 33-kilometre WestCONnex will be Australia's biggest transport project. Some say the cost will be as much as $20 billion, and guess what? It's all for roads. WestCONnex is unbelievably a major road building program at a time of accelerating climate change, when world cities with increasing population densities like Sydney are making public transport their priority. It's made up of a series of road projects, including expansion and extension of the M4 and the M5, new linking roads and tunnels, and recently added extensions to the north and south. At the city end, it will culminate in a number of so-called interchanges, which will spew traffic into already congested residential streets. It heralds a return to inner-city expressway threats of the 1960s and 70s, most of which were successfully and thankfully opposed by the resident action pioneers who saved great swathes of Sydney's historic fabric, which are now vibrant, desirable and sustainable neighbourhoods. It beggars belief that here we are at the beginning of the 21st century, facing the same myths of driving where you like, in fast times, with plenty of parking, like the pot of gold at the end of your trip. In Tony Abbott speak, drivers will be singing in their cars. WestCONnex was recommended by an unelected advisory body, Infrastructure New South Wales. There was no opportunity for public consultation or expert comment.
Very nice.
Having appointed this body, its recommendations were taken up by the Premier Farrell and inherited without review by Premier Baird. And there was the added incentive of federal funding coming from Prime Minister Abbott, whose DNA, he says, does not include public transport. For an expenditure of so much public money, which will start other transport projects with funds for a long time to come, there is alarming secrecy, a lack of documented information and justification for this project. The business case with assumptions, benefits and costs has not been released, and you have to be worried about why not. The route has changed a number of times, again without explanation, negating original arguments put forward for the project, such as the reinvigoration of Parramatta Road and better connections to Sydney Airport and Port Botany. These are either not happening or have dropped in priority and are not funded. The State Minister for Roads, when interviewed recently, didn't know much about the details of WestCONnex and why changes were being made, but was adamant that whatever the project was, he supported it. Finally, the project is being bulldozed through. Houses to be demolished for the expressway are being purchased, the contracts are being let before the completion of the environmental impact statement. This assessment, if done independently, would measure impacts on our communities and our environment, and it would be your chance to protest about problems and put forward alternatives, but it will be too late. Last December, in response to growing community concern about the project, and because of government silence about traffic data, environmental assessment and business case, the City of Sydney commissioned SGS Economics and Planning to do an independent review. Unlike state government information, this is a public document and it's available to everyone. The report first dealt with the New South Wales Government's stated objective for WestCONnex, and these are, there are four of them. 1, to support Sydney's population and economic growth by getting people from the west to Sydney's CBD for jobs. 2, to connect Sydney Airport and Port Botany with Western Sydney, especially for freight. 3, to create opportunities for urban renewal and improve livability on Parramatta Road. And 4, to relieve congestion. The SGS report tells us that WestCONnex will not achieve any of these objectives and instead will seriously impact on inner Sydney without meeting Western Sydney's current and future needs. So let's look at the first objective. The state government argues that WestCONnex supports Sydney's long-term population and economic growth by improving motorway access to Sydney's international gateways and places of business. At present, Western Sydney is home to half of Sydney's population, but only a third of the jobs. Every day, 226,000 people leave Western Sydney to work. SGS concludes that WestCONnex will not increase Western Sydney's access to jobs in the West or jobs in central Sydney. When Western Sydney workers travel to the Sydney CBD, they overwhelmingly use public transport. Around 90% travel by public transport, compared to 74% for the rest of Sydney commuters. Western Sydney commuters need less crowded and more reliable public transport, not new toll roads. WestCONnex will see new toll roads, new tolls on the M4 and the M5 east, and the new motorways. For anyone travelling from the southwest to central Sydney, this could add up to $20. This could be $20 a day. Taking parking into account, the cost could be up to $240 a week for a commuter, often with no alternative access to effective public transport or to local work. That Western Sydney needs more jobs and public transport what Western Sydney needs is more jobs and public transport in the major centres of Parramatta, Penrith, Liverpool and Campbelltown and Carlton. Last December, the state government released the Metropolitan Strategy. We've been waiting for that Metropolitan Strategy for 4 years. We got it last December, December 14. We got the elections in 2 weeks' time. And it has a vision to strengthen these centres, those centres I've just named, Parramatta, Penrith, Liverpool, etc. And make it easier for residents to move between where they work, live, shop, study and play. So really make life livable for people in the West. The transport needed to drive the metro strategy includes connecting roads and heavy rail between those centres and light rail mass transit to get people around local areas. In an article in the Sun Herald yesterday, WestRock, the Western Sydney Regional Organisation of Council, said this, and I quote, "Politicians should look beyond roads promises and give Western Sydney the public transport and jobs, the region needs to beat congestion. It goes on to say, and I quote, that Western Sydney was chained to roads after decades of underinvestment in public transport. Public transport use was as low as 4.7% in some western suburbs, despite half the population leaving the region each day for work. The article quoting WestCONnex goes on to say, the result of car dependency was the dirtiest air in Australia, which left Western Sydney residents swimming in a stagnant pool of toxic gas. You have to ask, why isn't the Premier, who is also the Minister for Western Sydney, acting on the recommendations of his own government's metropolitan strategy to bring forward public transport projects between and within Western centres to deliver investment and jobs growth for Western Sydney? Secondly, what's the second objective of WestCONnex? The state government argues that it is needed to link Western Sydney with Sydney Airport and Port Botany, especially for freight. Two-thirds of the containers that go through Port Botany currently have an origin or destination in Sydney's west. But the linking roads are not funded and are not in the initial phases of the project. And nor should they be. STS tells us that the case for WestCONnex no longer stacks up in the face of Sydney's proposed second airport at Badgerys Creek, which the federal government committed to last year. As a 24-hour airport, Badgerys Creek will become the natural choice for air freight bound for outer Sydney, reducing the load on Sydney Airport. Badgerys Creek, as a fully functioning airport, will bring jobs and economic development to the west and will need extensive expenditure on road and rail connections. And by the time Badgerys Creek is operating in 2024, anyone looking for a faster drive from the Western Mascot will be going to the wrong airport. For freight that must go through Port Botany, STS says that the existing underutilised freight rail network can take containers to and from intermodal terminals in Western Sydney. And for essential road freight, the M5 East will remain the most convenient route, even if WestCONnex is built. So, coming to the third main objective for WestCONnex, it will deliver the long-promised renewal of Parramatta Road, creating an attractive, pedestrian-friendly, tree-lined boulevard. How often has that been promised in the last 30 years of Parramatta Road? But with high-quality public transport and around 50,000 new dwellings. But the change to WestCONnex route won't help reduce traffic on Parramatta Road to allow for the promised renewal without reducing the road's capacity. And there are no plans to reduce the road's capacity. And the latest change plans last December, and that's the other thing, that the plans keep changing, include a possible portal at Camperdown, channeling traffic onto Parramatta Road near Sydney University. And finally, the government promised that WestCONnex will relieve Sydney's notorious congestion, which already costs Sydney $5 billion a year and will be nearly double to $8 billion by 2020. And that was before WestCONnex was even proposed, so imagine what it would be like if it goes ahead. But experience across Australia and the world is that new roads breed more cars. Induced traffic was a major problem for Melbourne's abandoned East-West Link motorway, which was ultimately revealed to deliver just 55 cents benefit for every dollar spent. The recent review of WestCONnex by Infrastructure Australia found that the state government must review its business case, as it does not account for the negative impacts of new and changed traffic flows caused by motorways. In fact, the New South Wales government's own infrastructure strategy states, and I quote, "Rail is the most effective mode for enabling access to the CBD, with just 2 passenger trains able to carry more people than a single motorway lane carries in a typical peak hour." That's their own strategy. Great strategy, they've just got to do it. Currently, around 25,000 vehicles enter the CBD during the morning peak. If WestCONnex is built, it could channel another 10,000 vehicles towards the CBD, which our narrow Victorian streets will not be able to accommodate. WestCONnex will massively escalate congestion, destroying years of city work to transform our CBD for pedestrians, businesses and tourists. The next stage of our consultants' work will address traffic impacts on inner city communities. We already know that there will be major interchanges swamping St Peters and Rozelle and surrounding densely populated residential areas. The latest WestCONnex route adds a northern extension that exits at the Rozelle rail yards towards the highly congested Anzac Bridge and onto residential streets of Rozelle, Annandale, Lilyfield and Balmain. It could block the old rail corridor, destroying hopes for new public transport and open space at the Bays precinct. In the City of Sydney area, the new M5 will disgorge traffic onto King Street, Newtown, one of Sydney's most vibrant and people-friendly main streets. It will funnel traffic into neighbouring St Peters, Erskineville, Alexandria, Waterloo, Redfern, Zeppelin and Green Square. Green Square already has serious congestion because successive state governments have failed to commit to adequate public transport for the largest urban renewal project in Australia with a planned population of 53,000 people by 2030. And close to my heart is Sydney Park, where we've made major investment to create a wonderful and much needed regional park for people living at higher densities. It's to have its edges shaved off for more road lanes. It will be isolated in a city of traffic, making it harder to access, with its surroundings blighted by widened roads, tunnel portals, on and off ramps and ventilation stacks. This is vandalism on a government scale. Yeah. And while the New South Wales Labor Party's infrastructure plan announced last month abandons the St Peters interchange, as well as other parts of WestCONnex, including the M4 to M5 link, does support lengthening the M4 east towards Sydney CBD, which is a disaster for our city and of little value for motorists. And in fact, SGS tells us that drivers won't get travel time improvements unless all of the proposed road sections are built. So the City of Sydney has called on the state government and the opposition to urgently rethink WestCONnex in the context of the backlog of vital transport links. Shockingly, this $15 billion series of high-cost, large-scale road projects will eat up transport funding for decades and rob us of the chance to build 21st century transport solutions which are transforming other world cities. More shocking still is that the information we require to properly assess whether WestCONnex will deliver what is promised and is value for public money is either not available, not released, or doesn't exist. The process is a sham, and it's as though we don't matter and the project is going ahead whatever.
Yeah.
We don't have the business case for the project because it has not been released by the state government. We don't have an environmental impact assessment, but work is already beginning. Mike and Tony have had the photo opportunity already with matching silver spades.
Sods! Sods!
There's been no response to claims that the cost-benefit analysis has understated impacts and costs. The New South Wales Auditor-General has criticised WestCONnex for the poor business case, conflicts of interest and lack of information to assess if the project is economically viable. 4 even adequate details of the design are not available for appraisal. And with the history of failure of recent high-profile toll roads due to unrealistic traffic forecasts, will it again be the taxpayers of New South Wales that will carry the financial risk?
Yeah.
So who is driving this project? Who is it for? What will it achieve? And who benefits?
Next.
Certainly, the ideology behind it belongs to the middle of last century. Like other international cities, public transport use has grown in Sydney over the past 30 years, while vehicle use has slowed. But our antediluvian governments don't seem to grasp this. It would seem that WestCONnex is being packaged to sell to the private sector as a series of revenue opportunities, and it's been designed to maximise toll collection, hence the secrecy. Its usefulness or otherwise as a transport option is not its prime purpose, nor are the impacts on our city and its communities a concern for government or the vested interests involved. Having sold this road project, government will start another toll road project and the process will continue. The problem with public transport projects in terms of the current political mentality is that they require more government input than the government is prepared to make, and they require vision and long-term planning and commitment. WestCONnex will not transform Sydney for the future with new jobs and population growth in eastern Sydney centres. It reinforces polluting radial car-based travel concentrated on central Sydney. For the price of WestCONnex, strategic, heavy and light rail projects could significantly reduce road congestion by meeting increasing demand for public transport. Such investment in public transport projects in the West would dramatically reduce road traffic and create a more livable, sustainable Sydney for us all, today and into the future. And not only is this in accordance with the state government's own recently released metro strategy, it's responsible planning for the future of our city. Thank you.
Productivity and the macroeconomy, as the Lord Mayor mentioned. He's produced a report on WestCONnex, the details of which I'm sure is about to divulge. It's from SGX Economics and Planning. Please welcome Terry Rawnsley.
Clover is a charismatic speaker. I'm an economist, so please bear with me. I'm going to talk us through our report. It's about 60 pages long. It's glad to set us up on the City of Sydney website. So I'm just going to keep it to a higher level pitch tonight. So the key points we found. Sydney's economy is evolving, its population is growing, which means the way people travel around the city is changing. Toll roads in the past in Australia have proved a very uneven investment. So some roads, the Lane Cove Tunnel, the Cross City Tunnel, the Clayton 7, Airport Link in Brisbane have all been disasters. There have been good toll roads. Melbourne, the C-Link's been a great success, the M7 has been a great success, and these because they were the best solution to the problem at hand. WestCONnex is a collection of multiple toll roads. It's not just one toll road, it's three and a half, 4 roads, which makes things even more challenging. The other issue is that local roads may continue to remain very congested, which will impact on high-quality urban renewal. You won't see that Parramatta Road renewal that people talk about. This is a quick economics lesson on how Sydney's economy is changing. So here we have 3 industries I've picked to explain this. So in 1995, there are about 250,000 jobs in manufacturing. Over time, that's declined down to about 190,000. Over the same time, we've seen professional services go from 120,000 to about 240,000. So professional services covers a whole menagerie of people. It covers accountants, lawyers, architects, consultants, marketers, a whole range of different services. And that's where the Australian economy is heading. Also in Sydney, there's a very large increase in professional services, financial services. It's gone from about 100,000 jobs to 140,000 jobs. So these services are growing more and more. And where these different types of jobs distribute across the city is very different. So this is where these jobs are located. So the first column here is manufacturing. So 5% of all the jobs in manufacturing are in Blacktown, South East. Then Auburn 5%, Fairfield 4, 1.8, all the way down there. It's a very even distribution because manufacturing jobs like to disperse across the city. They like cheap land, access to the roads. They happen to be out by themselves in industrial estates. Whereas finance and insurance, almost 60% of those 180,000 jobs are in the CBD. They like to concentrate together. Professional services, you've got about 30% in the CBD. You've got another 8% in the other parts of the City of Sydney. You've got 10% in North Sydney. So you've got 40 or 50% of jobs concentrated in and around the City of Sydney. So these jobs like to cluster together. It's a thing called agglomeration economies, which means that these jobs gain benefits from being closely located to each other. People learn from each other. Business opportunities are easier when you can walk and see a client rather than further away from them. On the flip side, the distribution of the population has changed a lot over the last 20 years. So this shows the change in population between 1991 and 2011. And the size of the dots show how great population growth is. So a large dot's about 20,000, a small dot's about 2,000. So you can see a great increase in population in the city of Sydney there, along the rail corridors heading to the west. But also you see large population increases in the northwest growth area and in the southwest. And a whole range of growth in population in western Sydney. So this changing dynamics between jobs and population is changing the way we travel. I really like this chart here. It tells you a lot about how Sydney and Melbourne is thrown in there for comparative as well, how it's changed and evolved over the last 100 years. So here, this is a growing population in Sydney and Melbourne. What happened was all that growth took place on the heavy rail network. The cars were quite rare, people used public transport in every region. This great leap up here is when the Sydney Circle line was built. More capacity came into the network, more people used it. Then we had sort of the industrialisation of the west, the city expanded, less people used their cars. Melbourne had the same pattern as well. But sort of around the late 70s, early 80s, things started to change. And this coincides with the economy restructuring. We moved away from manufacturing jobs which were dispersed, more towards these service jobs which are concentrated in key centres, including the city of Sydney. So you can see over the last year, rail patronage has gone gangbusters. More and more people are using public transport to access their jobs, because these jobs are clustered together. You can see here that Melbourne's had a ramp up in the last 20 years. This is a result of the construction of the Melbourne Underground City Link. So it's a big increase in rail capacity, which helped transform Melbourne CBD, and it's meant that a whole range of new people, new development has occurred on the heavy rail network, and people are taking advantage of this. Over the same time, we're seeing a very different pattern with car usage. So this is the per capita car usage over time. This is drawn from a Department of Infrastructure and Regional Development report released a couple of years ago, which looked at the per capita car usage. So during the 60s and 70s, there was a rapid growth. That's when that economy was based around manufacturing, dispersed activity. The car was the easiest way to travel around. During the 70s, 80s, the world was changing, the economy was restructuring. People were using their car less and less. And the projection forward is saying that, well, on average, people won't be travelling any more by car. The challenge we'll face, though, is that even though the per capita change in kilometres travelled is levelling off, we just have more and more people. So there's more and more people living in Sydney, which means there'll be more car travel. But this is showing us that there's been a move away from car travel, more towards public transport. And state government has recognised this. And this is the expenditure by the New South Wales government over the last 10 years on roads and public transport. So road being the green line here, which is growing, but you can see that the investment in rail transportation has increased. People have recognised there's more and more demand for public transport on the heavy rail network, and government is responding. It's investing more and more into public transport and the heavy rail system and operating costs. So this is being seen and acknowledged. Clover also touched on the key points around WestCONnex, so I won't dwell too much. But the problem we have here is these are several different roads going in here. When we looked at sort of the failed motor roads, toll roads over the last 10 years, what happened was it was very hard for people predicting what traffic would be to get it right. So the Lane Cove Tunnel, the Cross City Tunnel, the Clem 7, people were off by a margin of 40 or 50%. Even on day one, people knew what the distribution of the population of the employment was, the traffic volume was still half what it should be. This is because it's very difficult to model people's behaviour. How will people react to a toll on their time,